Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Charles Ross. I'm a principal at the Policy and Insights Division of the Economist Group, and it's a real pleasure to be able to spend the next hour or so with you today to discuss this really great topic, coming of age, how financial services can innovate like big tech. A big thank you to Databricks for generously supporting this Insight Hour. Firstly, before we get into it, a few housekeeping items. It's best to use Google Chrome if you can to view this webinar. You'll get the best experience by using that. You'll also find the full biographies of our panelists to the right of your screen, but I'll give you short introductions of them each in a moment. And you'll also find a box with a selection of further reading on this topic available for download on the console. So it does give me great pleasure to introduce the four leaders from across the region who we have here today to tackle this question, this discussion we have here today. Firstly, Chun Nakai is the global industry leader of financial services and sustainability at Databricks. He was formerly of Goldman Sachs for 14 years, so he has played in both the very traditional financial services sector and now within a very innovative tech firm. Welcome, Junta, to the discussion today.
Thanks for having me.
Samir Gupta is the Managing Director and Chief Analytics Officer at DBS Group. Samir has more than 20 years of experience in finance, focused on front-end banking and financial services across analytics, commercial excellence, strategic marketing, customer experience, change management, and pricing. From my time living in Singapore, I'm now based in Melbourne, I know firsthand the innovative products DBS has brought to market. So I look forward to hearing how DBS has managed to achieve this level of innovation. Welcome to the discussion, Samir.
Thank you, Charles. Look forward.
Aneta Biakanis is the head of technology, wealth technology at AMP. Aneta leads a team of IT professionals to deliver best-in-breed wealth technologies, manage risk, and satisfy customers. She's also currently undertaking a doctorate in AI, I hear. So I'm impressed and very thankful that she has found the time to be with us today. Thank you, Aneta, and welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And Andy Chun is the Regional Director, Technology Innovation at Prudential PLC. As a member of the digital team, he's responsible for technology innovation initiatives in support of Prudential's digital ecosystems and driving customer acquisition through AI. He's also Vice President of the Hong Kong Computer Society and an adjunct professor at City University of Hong Kong. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
Thank you all for joining me today. Just a few words to put a platform down of where this discussion is going today, because we've all seen in the last year or so, it has felt like a lot of innovation has been going on, fueled by this need for companies to find new ways of working to keep operations going during the pandemic. This virtual event we're having today is an indication of the innovation we've done at the Economist Group to create these new types of events. And we've all been doing this. And perhaps most notably, the massive advances in health innovation we've seen and have been closely following through this rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines based on this really innovative mRNA technology. That might be the most obvious example of massive innovation, acceleration during this period. But in reality, most corporate innovation is being stymied by data silos and sort of internal bottlenecks of one sort or another. Few sectors are as hampered, unfortunately, by regulations, legacy systems, and legacy mindsets as the financial services industry, whose firms are often slow to innovate compared with other sectors. Compounding this problem is talent. Talent is always a problem that comes up in all of these conversations, or perhaps a lack of it is the challenge, as the industry struggles to attract the keenest tech minds away from the technology behemoths. Tech firms may not have deeper pockets than banks, but they can often provide an environment which is not weighed down by operational restrictions and can often provide very attractive equity packages linked to double-digit growth that you see at these tech behemoths. However, artificial intelligence and data-driven innovation have promised much for the financial services sector. But for many companies, the return on investment from innovation is proving elusive. For some, that means treating AI not as a goal, but as a solution to a business problem. So how can the banking and finance sector make the most of the end of the sort of stagnation that we tend to find ourselves in? And there was a great article which was published by The Economist in January this year on this topic. I do encourage you to read it because it does hold some of the answers. But until you do get to that, in the meantime, we're going to try and find some of our own answers to overcoming this stagnation over the next hour as we discuss the challenges firms face in terms of talent acquisition, how capabilities can be developed both internally and externally, and which cultures allow AI-driven innovation to not just thrive, but also keep that innovation grounded in reality. So let's start tackling this, and I'd like to sort of start with each of you, if I may, and understand and get a feel from each of you as to where you think the industry sits on this sort of stagnation to innovation scale. And Netta, can I start with you, if I may? Is it fair to say, are people being fair where they say that innovation in the financial services sector is stagnating?
No, I don't think so. I believe in the old saying where necessity is the mother of innovation. And unfortunately, we have had a fair share of pressures and dramatic competition increase in the financial industry from places that probably 10, 20 years ago, none of us could have even think of it. In that kind of environment, you have to continuously innovate to be able to compete with other financial companies, but also big tech giants that are heavily hitting the financial industry with quite innovative products. And I have to say, and I have a long career in technology as well as in financial industry, I haven't seen as much innovation as in the last few years, simply because there is no other way but to stay competitive, but to explore options and technologies that in the past you didn't have to do. The other thing that I would like to highlight is that it's a combination of expertise that sits in the companies with long tradition in financial industry, their brand as well, and the trust they build with their customers, together with the promise of creating experience for their customers where convenience is not jeopardizing the security. And that's the space where I find the artificial intelligence to be almost like a holy grail for digitization. And I see lots of examples in our company, my company, as well as other companies in Australia and the world, where innovation is really hitting the mark.
Would other panelists agree with that? Have we seen a sort of a dramatic increase in the last couple of years, as Annette suggested, just to sort of stay competitive? Are you finding that? Samir, would you, or Andy, are you finding that within your business?
Sure, I think so. I mean, and maybe I think it's true that necessity has led to a lot of it in the last 18 months or so. And from a DBS context, the way we have been looking at it, we've been on a digitization journey very aggressively over the last 7-8 years. And what we found is that the necessity helped a lot of laggards catch up. And we have, over the last 18 months, actually doubled up on digitization, the next phase, the AI 2.0. How do we take it forward? How do we keep ahead of it? And that's where, so we have never actually had any stagnation in terms of innovation. We've actually doubled up. We fundamentally believe that AI-enabled banking is going to be the future, where things are going to be for our customers hyper-personalized, very, very intelligent banking that enables and helps the customers do what they want to do faster, quicker, efficiently, cheaper. That's one big, huge area. The another area that we are very focused on, all our employees are going to be AI-enabled. what this means is that every person makes decisions. A lot of times those decisions take time because you have to gather a lot of data, insights, and pull that together. How can AI enable each and every employee as they make their day-to-day decisions? And that's going to be big as we see going forward. The last, but not the least, is all the risk and control areas, whether it's AML, credit risk, any of those areas where AI, data, more of it, more usage are going to be, I think we will double down. And the combination of digital plus this AI is where the future is, and where we are very much focused on.
Really interesting, Samir. It made me think of one of the polling questions that we have for our audience today. And I might just ask this question, then I might go to you, Andy, and get your thoughts on this before I give the responses to it. So the first polling question is, what are your top use cases for data analytics and AI? Samir, you've just suggested what some of yours might be for data analytics and AI, and while our audience sort of respond to that polling question. Andy, I'd love to get your thoughts on from you, the sort of top use cases for data analytics and AI in a prudential context.
Yes, for us at Prudential, I think the top use cases for data analytics AI is really how do we make use of that data to really understand what our customers' needs are, to be closer to our customers. And this is particularly important in this digitization age where everyone's online and digital. And the reason we're doing that is that if you don't understand your customers, you're not able to offer them the most appropriate advice on products and services. So we need to understand, who they are, what life stage they may be in, what are their needs, both and particularly in health and wealth. And then secondary, we once we have this information, we use AI in the background at the back end for things, more traditional things like dynamic pricing, automated underwriting, and then for claims, outlier detection, et cetera, et cetera. So it's on both ends. First and foremost is the customer facing end to understand our customers, and then on the back end is how to do things faster, better, and cheaper. And that's the use case for us. And back to your question about stagnation, I think maybe a few years ago, maybe five years or earlier, there may be some stagnation. And the reason for that is that the industry have been focusing mostly on transactions and numbers rather than on the human aspect of what we do. How are we going to help our customers? What are their needs, and so forth. So with the interest and capabilities in AI, big data, machine learning, we realize that once we have data, we can really understand and make sense of these customer data more accurately, so that we could predict things better. So I think the stagnation is that companies were rushing to collect data, which frankly, banking and financial service, we only have transaction numbers. So what companies have been doing is rushing to collect customer data, behavioral data through interactions with maybe digital ecosystems. So as you know, in Pulse, we have this digital ecosystem called Pulse by Prudential, where we help customers stay healthier and wealthier by providing a whole range of different tools. And many of these are AI-based tools for fitness, for dieting, wellness, and then on the finance side as well. So we have AI doctors for health, AI doctors for financial advice. And then with the pandemic, coincidentally, we have these virtual teleconsultations where people can see and talk to their doctor or financial consultants virtually through the webcam. And then for medical needs, we also partner with delivery services so that prescriptions can be delivered right to your home. So you don't have to get out of your home for any of these the health and financial needs. So I think since AI, this explosion in AI work, and then the commoditization of AI in the past 5 years, I think innovation haven't stopped really. The companies got data ready, and now they're just ready to go. And then with AI technology, a lot of them have been standardized in terms of the algorithms. We know what algorithms to use. It's a matter of making sure you have the data are clean. And I'm sure Chun is going to talk more about that on the data side. But I think this is a great timing. All the data is there, the algorithm's ready. I think and our companies are just innovating like crazy.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Really interesting, and I'd love to delve into some of the things you're doing at Prudential and how you've managed to sort of innovate around those in a moment. One takeaway from me is that maybe we've chosen a panel of just very innovative companies, and we don't have those that we should have chosen some which are stymied in terms of their innovation today. Let me get into the polling results, and then Chun, I'd love to get your thoughts on these results to see if this is what you're seeing in the market as well. So the question was, what are your top use cases for data analytics and AI? And the respondents were given a range of different options that they should choose. And the equal top response there was compliance and fraud detection, which is what Anetta's responded to, mentioned, and customer segmentation, which is what Andy and Samir were both highlighting. Further down the list, we have risk management. Those are both at 23%, compliance and fraud detection and customer segmentation. A bit further down, we've got risk management at 15%, followed by investing. Dynamic pricing and optimization was a bit further down at 11% of people indicating that as a top use case. Chun, is that sort of what you'd expect in terms of the use cases for data analytics and AI?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really funny. That's the ordering, because we spend a lot of time talking to our 600 plus financial service customers around the world and asking them the question, well, what are you actually doing with data and AI? And the top use cases are typically customer 360, which encompasses things such as customer segmentation. It is fraud detection as well, which falls under compliance, and it's risk management as well. So typically those are the three biggest areas of compute and usage on our platform. So it's quite consistent with what we're seeing and hearing from our customers as well.
Excellent. I'm just going to carry on with my second polling question here, actually, because we have been covering it a little bit in our discussion. And the question is, again, around data, and this is for the audience, which is what types of data are you using for advanced analytics and AI? Andy's already talked through some of the types of data that he has been using. When you're speaking, you mentioned things like transaction data is sort of a big data pool that you have. What are other types of data are you sort of top of mind for you when you're using advanced analytics and AI? I'd love to hear from any of you if you have a sort of anything above and beyond just transaction data.
I can take a stab at it. I think a lot of interaction data that banks traditionally would not have used. So we are finding that interactions, what customers do on our digital assets, how do our digital assets behave? Because a lot of them are through APIs. How can we predict when something's going wrong? So I think the real big data in banking right now beyond transaction is the interaction data. And then for us, actually, we look at use cases, and then we look at all the data that can help address that use case, and we try and see what ones are available in a responsible way and how do we use it. So quite a broad variety of data is being used, and it's really what will help for the use case.
Yes, and then for us is really the behavioral data, the interaction with our digital ecosystem. And being a digital ecosystem, we get data not just from our own app, but through our partners' digital ecosystem as well. And that's the beauty of having a digital ecosystem, is that you could get a more holistic and complete view of our customers through our partnerships.
Excellent. So lots of nodding there. So let me give you the answers then. So we have got our responses in for this poll, and so of the list of our options that our audience had today, the number one response was customer data. 40% of the respondents are saying that they're using that type of data for their advanced analytics and AI. That was followed by transaction data at 38%, followed by market data at 13%. Further down the ranks are things like social media by 6% of companies I guess there's some nodding there that may be a number. If we ran this again in sort of a couple of years' time, that might increase from the sort of 6% that we're seeing now. And a very small minority there are using, 3% are using ESG data to drive their advanced analytics and AI. With the sort of the big report from the IPCC, which came out earlier this week, there's a lot of attention on that at the moment. Maybe that is an area where we will see a bigger uptick in that type of data as well. Any thoughts on those? Any surprises out of there?
I mean, yeah, personally, for me, at least in the customer base that we speak to, I'm a little bit surprised about the lack of discussions about alternative data sets, because that is a huge area of focus for customers. And that's across asset classes and it's across subsegments as well. So for example, if you're in asset management, they've historically been massive users of alternative data. And alternative data simply is data sets that are not traditionally used by financial service institutions. So things like satellite images, it could be IoT data, it could be geolocation data, it could be social media data. And that we've seen a massive proliferation in those types of data sets that are being used to either to make better investments, either to understand kind of how customers are thinking about your brand and your perception. And that's been a significant use case that we see, particularly and started in asset management, more specifically in hedge funds. But recently we see more and more insurance companies, retail banks, et cetera, starting to adopt these kind of data sets to augment their personalization efforts, fraud detection efforts, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent. Thank you, Junta. Annette, you had your camera, you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
No, just completely agreeing with the conversation happening. The key focus is on the customer data and the behaviors, but I see very, very soon focus on broad alternative data sets, and especially when you design innovative, creative products, that's absolutely necessary in the financial industry to understand broader.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Really interesting. So we've been talking about data and obviously the use of data and data sets for this for the use of AI, but there's obviously a lot of sort of challenges, obstacles, which are sort of sort of preventing us from having sort of getting greater use out of those and getting value out of those. There's a number, and a number that I want to cover through our discussion today, but please do throw up any other pain points that you are facing during this period as well. First one I want to focus on is talent, and sort of that as a challenge for people to make the most, or companies to make the most, get the most value out of this. And I'm going to lead with a question which has just come in from the audience about this, and they are asking, what's the most in-demand IT technical skill set the financial sector are looking for to acquire from professionals? So where is your pain point at the moment in terms of not having IT people with the right skills at the moment? And I'd love to hear from Annette, Andy, or Samir, because you probably all have this pain point in various different sort of capacities. Andy, can I go to you first?
Yes, yes. The pain points. I mean, I think industry-wide and across many different industries, many of the key focuses on AI and machine learning, and those talents are really hard to get. What we have done is there's a few things we have done. First, we make the job more interesting and challenging. I mentioned before, we're putting the human back into the picture. What that means is that we focus on very user-centric values. What are we bringing to helping our customers? And for Prudential, we're aiming mainly on health and wealth. How are we helping people take better care of themselves and manage their finances better? And this is particularly important in the pandemic, where those are the two top priorities for our customers. So challenging work is one of the first things in attracting talent. The second is, we see it's hard to hire new talent quickly. So what we've done is we do a lot of in-house training. And as Samir, similar to Samir, we see ourselves as really an AI-first company. And what that really means is that whatever we do, we always ask ourselves, where's the AI? How can AI help us do things faster, better, cheaper, do we have the data? How do we collect the data? Is the data clean? Can we access the data? So all these questions we expect not just the tech people to ask, but everyone across all business functions. And that's why we have trained, over 4,000 people on AI already in the past year, just the past year. And in terms of development, technical AI coding skills, we started a continuous learning culture project a little more than a year ago. And at that time, AI was developed mainly by a core set of team inside the regional office. And what we have done over the past year is encourage AI training across all countries that we work out of. And now we have several hundred internally certified AI developers. These are actual coders. So imagine trying to hire 500 new additional AI developers in a year. That's impossible. So, but with upskilling and cross-skilling, we're able to do that. And it's great. It's not only do we get talent, there's a culture change where learning is encouraged and it's part of their job, but it's also improved our colleagues, the relationship, because they're basically working together, they're studying together, and then we get those who are better at AI to be mentors, to offer workshops, to offer tutorials on a very regular basis. So it's really this culture where where learning is expected and encouraged, and we award people who does well. They become what we call our elite AI scientists, and they help other people be elite as well.
It's a really interesting approach, Andy, that you're leading with AI as a business. So when there is a sort of particular challenge or particular opportunity, so the first consideration is this something that can be solved using AI? It does sound like a sort of an unusual approach. And I do wonder how many other companies out there are taking that sort of AI first approach to these sorts of challenges. But I can see that by doing that, you're really sort of creating that AI-focused culture within the business, so making it people comfortable working with it and easy to sort of understand, and of course attractive to attract talent to the business. If you are known as AI, is there anybody else? Annette, are you taking AMP are taking a similar approach to your view of AI within the business, or something different?
Yeah, let me start first by saying that attracting very strong software engineers is a very challenging thing at the moment. And to be fair, it has been magnified by COVID lockdowns, borders closure, and so on and so forth. And so that's the first thing. And second, I think we have to acknowledge that we have systems and platforms that are with technologies that are not AI, and ensuring that these feature-rich platforms that have served for years, they still have to be maintained, they still have to be compliant, and they have to be enhanced, is equally a challenge. So it's not just throw interesting new roles in artificial intelligence and harvest the environment. You have to find the right balance of both. What AMP is doing that, and I can completely complement what my colleague Andy was talking about, is creating a learning culture. Because it's not just not having a talent, but the existing talent needs to build new skills. And new skill sets are such that require all of us to continuously develop our skills. The roles and skill sets such as data scientists, we talked for years about DevOps. Now we're all talking about machine learning ops, having cloud-ready environments where you can host a huge volume of data and that's commercially effective. These are all prerequisites for you to create a learning culture and environment where you can take advantage of innovation and artificial intelligence. And we have to work on both. The other way that we approach to bringing skills and competencies that are not readily available and it takes time for us to build, is when we partner with fintech, that they bring the skills as well. So I think it's an all-encompassing learning culture and taking advantage of what the market can offer for us to be able to innovate, not just one or the other.
I can see how that skills piece is a particular challenge for us, like the financial services sector, where you may, more than sort of potentially some other industries, use more proprietary sort of systems and software required. And I guess I'd love to hear from you, Chun, whether are you seeing more companies sort of move away from that to more of an open software, open platform, open way of working? So I can see how that might make it easier to attract talent if you're taking that sort of approach to business.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally think that adopting cloud technologies and also focusing on open source is a significant recruiting tool on its own. And if you take a step back and think about if you're a talented technologist today, and you simply have the option of going to work for maybe an incumbent banking institution that has proprietary technologies and proprietary languages, and B, you had an option to go for an institution that embraced the cloud, open source technologies, and decide which one of these two would you rather choose. I think most young, talented tech professionals would choose the latter, because that provides significant career growth. It provides significant career optionality rather than being stuck in a system that only one institution uses. So embracing open source, I believe, is a significant driver of recruiting and also for retention. That's the other part that I think we miss, is that it's very hard to recruit talented technologists. Arguably, it's even harder to keep them. And that's something that we hear from our customer base across the world, because in financial services, because it's a highly regulated industry, it might take you 12 to 15 months to work on a potential model, a potential product. And 12 months down, maybe business priorities have changed, or maybe the market conditions have changed. And you worked on something for 12 months that doesn't really go into fruition. Those things can be highly frustrating for a talented data scientist or data engineer. And simply these kind of constraints don't exist if you work in a media company or perhaps a retail company that's much more fast moving. So I certainly do believe that open source is a significant recruiting tool, and not only bringing people in, but also enabling them to do interesting things and grow, and hopefully retaining them as well.
And I think, thank you, Chun. I think a key part of sort of building the right culture is the sort of clearly the leadership from the very top of the business as well. Samir, I was fortunate to hear from your CEO, Piyush Gupta. It was a good couple of years ago now, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, or something like that, talking about the story of how you were developing Payla within the business, and how he, as the CEO of the firm, literally had to go around to all these different siloed parts of the business and get them focused, working on their different individual elements of the Payla ecosystem that was required to bring that product to market. You could probably tell that story much better than me, but I sort of have this sort of visual image of him as the top of the organization, just going around from cubicle, sort of getting things done to bring this innovation together. Is that sort of thing still happening within DBS? Is the leadership so important, or have you built sort of more of a culture around innovations that's not quite as essential?
Yeah, no, I think Payla was 7 years ago, and we were the first, right? That was like our peer-to-peer first, and now it's one of the most popular and most used app for payments in Singapore. And when we started off, there was not much. So I think, but now we've institutionalized a lot of that. We have platforms which are responsible for each part of the area. The business and platforms are together. They have joint KPIs. One of them is, each of them is innovation and doing that. And that has been one of our big things. And we have always a portfolio of innovative things that each platform is working on at various levels, some which are very early, more research oriented, and we are just trying something, some where we have tried it, it looks promising. So we will actually do a smaller, more targeted experiment with an actual use case. those that have passed through that actual use case, we are actually scaling out fast. Coming back to the talent question, I think this is one of our biggest issues that we face, the talent. And it's not, and COVID has actually, and especially in a country like Singapore, with a smaller talent pool around this, that's been a big challenge. So, and that will continue to be a big challenge. And it's not just about data science, it's really end-to-end engineering capability to incorporate AI into the processes. Because what we have found is that it's very easy to build a data science model, but actually it does not give you any value if you don't change the way you run your business and incorporate AI into the center of your process. And that is where the tough challenge is. So that is where I think most people who will be successful will have to change the way they work with AI at the center, because it will, that is going, and that's not going to be easy. That's a very significant transformation across all levels. You have to change all your front end, you have to change all your back end systems, you have to change how people operate, you have to change bankers who've been doing it a certain way for 30 years, they have to do it a different way. So it's going to be very, very significant change management to really leverage and get value out of AI. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Annette, I can see you nodding there on the screen. You were telling me earlier that you've recently you've got a new CEO on board, 172 years old, I think. AMP is that there or thereabouts. Yeah. New blood, new leadership within the business. Is that sort of, what benefits are you seeing from that? I know it's very early days. Is it sort of about bringing this new perspective to drive innovation?
Oh, absolutely. And what I can highlight, and probably if you're in Australia, you can read some of the articles that Alexis George, our new CEO, is talking about: focus on technology and focus on innovation. And few of my colleagues highlighted already that senior leaders' sponsorship of innovation and creating a learning culture is absolutely essential to enable innovation in the company. And it's not just talking about it, but expecting it to be part of the culture, especially experimentation. I think the time when you could have an experiment of 18 months or project of 18 months and then just announce it failed or whatever are gone. Now you have to experiment fast, learn fast. And I consider learning equally important as part of this experimentation success. You don't have to get the product at the end, but learnings that you gain from it are huge. The skill sets you gain from it are huge. And that does require senior leader sponsorship. It does change the culture, and we are very lucky that it seems that that's going to be a big part of the agenda for our new CEO.
It is funny, you're sort of almost saying that the financial services sector can now move fast and break things as well.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. You see, the word failure is being seriously redefined. Failure is just not taking the opportunity to learn something. And if you conduct an experiment within the constraints and with the budget given to you, you learn a lot. And we have conducted quite a few lately with really, really interesting learnings. I mean, it's changing the culture. It focuses on the quality of data, focuses on new skill sets, focuses the culture end to end. I really like that comment around not having just the data model and insights, but redesigning the end-to-end process to take advantage of these insights and data models. That's our key challenge and opportunity for the future.
Chun, I saw you nodding there. Did you agree? Did you want to add something?
No, I just completely agree with everything that's being said. I think, the reality is AI is probably the easiest part of AI. So, the hard part happens before. It's all the ML ops, DevOps, all the data cleansing, data engineering, because unless you have good data, as I think Samir mentioned, the outcomes of that is not going to be great. So I like to say, with bad data, you make bad decisions with high confidence. So those are the initial steps that need to be sort of focused on and improved in order for AI to really bring value to the institutions that are trying to deploy that. So, this goes back to kind of the talk about open source and cloud and leveraging the elastic compute and the latest tools to be able to do those things. I think they all come together and are very important. You can't have one without the other.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, this concept of sort of moving fast and breaking things is an interesting one in financial services. It reminded me of a conversation I had on a discussion, it was probably a couple of months ago now, where they had, there was a very senior person from a Singapore bank on that discussion. I won't name names, but they said that the sort of pandemic did provide an opportunity to take a bit more risk as a bank, because you really just had to get things done and get things to market quickly, so you could circumvent some of the sort of the checks and balances that you might sort of normally have to include, because the risk appetite had changed, because people understood that you just needed to sort of get things done. Is that the sort of experience that you've been having? Would you agree that has sort of happened during this pandemic over the last sort of year or so, Andy?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there is no better time for the banking financial service industry to innovate, because regulators are more open to newer technology. In fact, they're embracing new technology and fintech because there's a definite need. With pandemic, everything has to be virtual, digitized. Before, it was probably impossible to sell anything if it's not face-to-face with customers. Now, practically, over 90% of all our products can be sold virtually through teleconsultations and whatnot. So definitely, this is the best time to try new things, break things if you need to. But what we've done at Prudential is, besides this continuous culture for learning, is this continuous culture for innovation. And we have our own innovation process. We call it hot houses. So it's a combination of many things. It's a combination of agile development, design thinking, combined with hackathon-style coding, and then with the aim to deliver real go-lives and go-to-market and real value into our customer hands, not within months, but within, and not even within weeks, but within days. So it's really an exhilarating experience for everyone involved. And because our app has been downloaded over 30 million times, so whatever we do, it immediately impacts millions of lives. And we do this across all business functions and across all ranks. So we have, the CIOs, the chief marketing officer, and even CEOs from different countries, rolling up their sleeve, working together in teams to come up with the best solution. So it's really like a hackathon. We break into teams, and it's a competition and the best solution get deployed, not in just one country, but all the country at the same time. So with the pandemic, one of the things that we realized is that before we do this face-to-face, this kind of hot houses, where at most we might have 100 people. But with working now that we're all used to working virtually, we could have several hundred people across all the countries in the world working together on a particular problem, and then solving it, and then deploying it on all the countries at the same time. And I said within days. And the reason we're able to do that is that we have designed a well thought out infrastructure, CI/CD pipeline, automated testing with security and regulatory requirement on data all built in. And a lot of things that we do are already, Lego brick format with standardized APIs. So we could do, add a new functionality sometimes with just configuration, and that helps accelerate the process a lot. So there's a lot of back office work that has to be done in terms of infrastructure, so that we could, we could innovate at pace and scale with the confidence that we're not going to really break too much things, and will be within compliance and regulatory requirement as well.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of work on this internally, obviously, from what you've just sort of talked about. Much use of partners, delving, getting the sort of knowledge and input and expertise and innovation externally, or is it very much internal focused?
I mean, there's some partners, but not really a lot. we rely on internal talent mostly, and mainly because we want to keep the IP. And along with our learning culture, this hothouse innovation process is part of the learning process, because we learn from each other from across functions, and that's part of the overall push for a culture for continuous learning and continuous innovation. I mean, most companies, they may have hackathons maybe once or twice a year. We pretty much have a hackathon twice a month. Is that at that pace that we're trying to innovate?
Oh, Annetta, do you have a similar approach to innovation at AMP, or is it internally driven innovation, or is it with partners more to more extent than Andy might have at his Prudential?
Let me answer this in two ways. I will say that we use partners where appropriate, where we don't have available skills or expertise internally. The innovation process, when I look at some statistics, and I looked at some of them recently, the volume of delivering working features and working software in production has skyrocketed in comparison to a few years ago. So that's happening now on weekly basis versus traditional quarterly release or monthly releases and so on and so forth. And all these tools that we have introduced in the last few years that whole technology ecosystem, hosted on the cloud, using DevOps, using new open source techniques, has enabled much faster delivery of working software, implementing agile techniques as well. So we can't forget that we are in a highly regulated industry. So we don't have, we have to build software that continuously we are assured that is compliant with the regulation. And that has been a huge emphasis at AMP to achieving that. It has enabled us to do faster and better using new techniques. But that journey of moving from slow-paced platforms that are internally built to new contemporary ones has been equally interesting, because it's not easy, it's not simple. They're very feature-rich, but they do live on older technologies. And attracting right talent and right software engineering capability to achieve that, we have found that to be a challenge. We're working through that, but it takes time. Innovation is almost like an icing on the cake, and different companies define innovations in a different way. Enabling high efficiency and effectiveness in what we deliver quite often is driven by incremental innovation at AMP, and that's actively encouraged. And we do have our innovation process as well.
Excellent, interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. Different approaches for different firms clearly is always going to be the case. I'm just going to jump to a couple of questions coming in from our audience, if I might. We're knowing that I think we have about sort of 10 minutes or so to go. I might take a forward-looking view of this topic. One of the questions here is, what segment of financial services is expected to be impacted by the use of AI in the next 5 years, particularly touching on services offered in the developing nations? So looking forward to the next 5 years, where is AI going to have the biggest impact on financial services, with a view to with a focus on developing nations? Does anyone want to have a crack at that one? Anyone want to give us some insight into their 5 years of horizon for their business? Samir, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's very clear that where AI will be the most effective would be where you have the most data. You have the most data on the consumer side, and both in terms of transactions, number of customers, and doing that. At the same time, at least in the developing part of Asia, there is a significant unbanked opportunity. There is a significant underbanked opportunity, both on the credit side and on the banking side. And how can we bring a lot of AI, alternative data, and other capabilities to really service and engage these customers? And that's where, from an AI standpoint, that's where we see that it's going to be more and more around it, more around how do we create very, very tailored, very personalized solutions for very different segments around this region. We have to work with ecosystem partners. We have to work with non-traditional players, telecom companies, others, even governments and other things where there'll be, we have to work where we create AI insights without sharing data, but with the view that we are looking to create end-to-end solutions and make individuals' lives better. And if we fundamentally are able to focus on that and bring the power of ecosystems to do that, that's where the game changer, and AI can enable it. But it's really how do we focus on the customer side and the individuals and really drive that.
Chun, what are you seeing from the tech side? What does the next 5 years look like for financial services? If you're actually 5 years is not long enough for a crystal ball. Excuse me, it's too soon. We probably have a better view than that.
If I had to isolate one segment, and this goes true for both developed markets and also emerging markets, it would probably be insurance. And for Databricks, for example, or if you look at our financial service business, insurance is probably the fastest growing business that we have, which was surprising to me because 2 years ago, not many insurance companies were on the cloud. So I think that area will take off, and that's kind of more specific. On a more holistic level, I think, kind of being provocative, but I actually don't think there has been a lot of innovation in financial services. Relative to the history of financial service institutions compared to their own history, yes, there has been. But relative to other parts of the economy, I think it's, especially in developed markets, kind of, unarguable that financial services just hasn't had that same level of innovation that you've had. And if you think about the way you borrow money for a car, the way you get life insurance, the way you get mortgages today, it largely hasn't changed in the last decade or 2 decades. So the way in which most people interact with money, and I know there are some exceptions in emerging markets, but especially in developed markets like Singapore, and Australia, Japan, it really hasn't changed that much. And if you think about how you consume movies today, how you shop today, and compare that, there's kind of an order of magnitude gap. So in other words, if I think about it holistically, I think the future of finance and the future of money is going to be 3 things. It's going to be much more inclusive. I think Samir touched upon that, right? Dealing with the unbanked, underbanked. It's going to be much more instant, right? It shouldn't take, in the United States, 45 days on average to get a mortgage, right? And it's going to be much more invisible, right? So increasingly, finance is going to be embedded in the everyday products and services that people use and have been accustomed to. So in similar fashion that you get on Grab or Didi or Uber or Lyft and you walk out without paying, it becomes a part of the transaction in itself. And that has tremendous risks and opportunities for incumbents and challengers alike. For an incumbent, financial service institutions can run the risk of becoming almost like utilities with low brand awareness, low pricing power, and low mind share. But underpinning those 3 kind of mega trends that I said, so instant, inclusive, invisible, is data. Data is the ingredient that enables all 3 of these things. And I think that really comes down to all the conversations that I think everybody agrees upon here, is that you have to deal with the foundational parts of getting the data right, data collected, data cleaned, in order to be able to do these kind of things. And I think, I could go on or much deeper about kind of the data architecture, but I think so the fundamental components of things like how you architect data at an organization comes to fruition in those kind of areas. So there's going to be probably a lot more innovation going forward. As companies embrace open source, I think there's going to be a lot more new types of business models that we haven't even thought about. And especially in things like open banking in Australia, for example, is going to unleash innovation. So I'm very excited about what the next 5 years is going to bring. And I think they're going to have massive divergences between the companies who do that well and the companies that fall behind.
Thank you, Chun. You talk about the data architecture, and there was a question which has just come in, which sort of asked specifically about that. And I assume you're sort of talking about things like data lakes and data warehouses. Is that the sort of architecture which our financial firms need to be creating?
Absolutely. So data warehouses have been around since the 80s, And effectively, data warehouses enable you to answer things like what happened in the past. It's structured data, you could query it, you could basically answer what happened in the past. But if you think about those three megatrends that I mentioned, and you think about what is it going to take to be a successful, thriving, relevant financial service institution in the future, I think you're going to have to start answering much more harder questions, like what's going to happen? How can we make it happen? Getting much more predictive and prescriptive in your approach. And I think that data architecture sort of plays a big role, because you can't do that just simply on structured data. You need to start looking at the growth of unstructured data. So a lot of telematics, if you're an insurance company, it could be social media, it could be text. In order to deal with those two things, you need to have things like a lakehouse architecture, which is a term that a lot of academics and cloud vendors talk about. Lakehouse is simply a data paradigm where you take the best bits of a data lake, so the cost, effectiveness, the flexibility, the use cases, the machine learning, and the best bits of a data warehouse, so concurrency, transactionality, query performance, et cetera. And bringing those two things together is this lakehouse paradigm. Because if you have all your data, all your use cases, all your people being access to that data, I think it unleashes innovation in ways that are not possible today.
Excellent. Thank you, Junta. I'm going to go to another question from the audience here. This one is for you, Annetta. Hopefully it's not too controversial. Talking about the Royal Commission, which many people sort of listening to this will probably know took place in Australia recently. Just sort of understanding, what was your first-hand experience been of the impact of the Royal Commission on innovation?
I think it's just re-emphasized that necessity is the mother of innovation. We have been expected to respond to issues found to the Royal Commission much faster and much quicker. And we could not have done that without adopting innovation techniques of delivering working software much faster than traditionally. So also that highlighted the necessity of having right risk and compliance management in the company, where again, new techniques and new way of delivering this can be done only using tools that were not there before, such as artificial intelligence. But I do want to highlight one extra trend, just looking into the future, where I think we all have to face much more and discuss much more than what we have done so far. Creating products that are socially responsible, where we look after our planet as well, not just immediate needs of individuals. Having access to data, worldwide shared data, customer data, environmental data, and so on and so forth, I think will, and especially financial industry has to play a very important role into this process. So have to make us more socially conscious, where we invest the money and where we get the return on investment, because it's not just individual needs. We really have we have to keep this planet for the generations to come after us, not what we're doing right now. I think that's looking in the 5 years, that will become not just something as nice to have, but it will be expected as part of the products and services financial industry delivers. And that will differentiate successful from not that successful financial companies.
Yeah, very sobering thought. And I thoroughly agree that it will be expected of all companies, financial services and beyond. Andy, we've only got about a minute left, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to sort of give me your 5-year view, particularly as Junta called out that insurance is going to be the one which is at the forefront of that.
Yes, totally agree with Junta. I mean, with insurance, this is a great time to be in the insurance business. We have a lot more data, and we're getting better at using the data to understand our customers. So I think in the 5 years, I mean, with data and with better understanding of customers, what we could do is really personalization. And it's not just personalization as we know now, but really precise and hyper personalization, and not just in digital marketing, but in the products and services that we offer. For example, we could have, there will be bite-sized products, just-in-time products, just when you need it. For example, just before boarding a plane, you might want to buy some travel insurance, and then dynamic pricing, and most importantly, behavior-based pricing. I mean, if you see yourself taking good care of yourself, exercising daily, there's no sense that you should pay the same price as other people who are not really exercising, taking as good care of themselves that they should. And then there's a new trend to micro insurance as well. So I think what we're really aiming for, I think in 5 years, is really to be able to offer products and services to exactly the right person at the right time in their life stage, and the right product and the right price, and most importantly, right now, people really, if they want something, they want it immediately in their app. So there's no waiting for 1 or 2 weeks for a quote. That is not going to happen. So I think the trend is it's going to be super convenient, super personalized experience for our customers.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. That sounds like a world which I would be happy to sort of operate in, when particularly it's paired with Jun's sort of comments about it, things being inclusive, instant, and invisible to all of us. None of us want to know that we're operating with an AI bot. We just want to get things done. We just want to have the solutions. We are unfortunately out of time now, and I do want to really give you a big thank you for all of your contributions. I've been sort of taking some notes as we've been going through some really interesting points here. I guess that one of them is that from Junta, it's the sort of the tech industry doesn't necessarily think that you're innovating fast enough. Is a sort of an interesting insight here. So we all know that we're doing a lot of things, but from the outside, potentially it looks like more could be done. And so if you look to that five-year horizon, it does look like a lot can be sort of achieved within that period of time. In terms of skills, definitely need to build that internal culture around AI and sort of AI evangelists within the business and build up those skills and expertise, but don't not look externally as well, because you need to be open to sort of other innovation from outside, and trying to set up the business in an open source sort of way to make your business more attractive to talent to be able to come in and work for you, so you can get the right people to sort of achieve some of the strategies and ambitions that you are trying to do. Really interesting. Lots more. I'm sure you've got your own takeaways from this as well. Big thank you to all of you. Thank you very much for participating. A big thank you to everybody who's been watching this and the questions that they have inputted. We got to some of them, but unfortunately not all of them. We're always restricted for time on these things, but thank you for joining us today. And a big thank you to Databricks for supporting this webinar. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I want to thank Databricks for sort of making it possible and sort of bringing this fantastic group of people together. So there we are at the end. Thank you again for all of your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.